And that could be maybe they're decided to put some of that cash towards those pension obligations because they did have higher funded pension obligations, but you have to have a happy balance between the cash that you have for your current operations versus what you're going to have tied up in pension obligations. There needs to be a happy medium to be safe all around.
That's a very, over here. Oh. That is a very important statement that you just said, because we get that quite a bit from people who don't see this whole picture and keep throwing that we're irresponsible and our pension's unfunded. So what you just said makes a lot of sense. You got to look at the whole picture, and people keep pulling out one piece without looking at the whole picture, that there are all these different pieces in this big pie. And so what you're saying is that, what I'm hearing is that overall we are pretty well balanced with all of that.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I think you're doing an excellent job, especially compared to, we have a lot of cities. Like I said, I have over 45 cities, and the comparison to your fiscal health is tremendous. You're doing a great job.
And somebody brought up about bond rating a second ago. I know that, is this what the when you get rated on the bonds, what they look at this big picture? Because I know we just got another increase, don't we, Carrie? I mean, I don't think, it's kind of like a bank. They're not going to give you more and more credit if we're not doing well, because we just got an increase.
They run the same ratios that they would do for your own personal debt. They run those debt service ratios. They run the liquidity ratios. They want to see where you're putting your money and how you can sustain to make those payments.
What is it now, Carrie? I don't want to brag about that because that was really good news too.
With our most recent bond refunding, when we had to go through Standards & Poor's, they did increase our rating. I'm trying to remember which bond it was on. We've done so many refundings recently. It was the redevelopment. So yes, with the redevelopment bonds, they were upgraded from A-, I believe, to A. So we have actually on a couple of items that we've had our upgrading on credit rating.
Good, thank you.
If I could tag onto that. So you were just a moment ago, and so was Mrs. Spiegel, talking about that pension and paying that pension. So I know we've heard of some cities who have dedicated more money to pay down this pension allotment. And so if I'm taking in what you're telling us, cities can go ahead and pay forward on that, but then those revenues are not available for potentially that emergency fund, and it withdraws them from the unrestricted funding for doing future building, repairs, anything along those lines.
Absolutely, exactly.
And another part is those cities that are paying forward, if there's a change in whatever their allotment is, they don't get the money back from PERS, correct?
No.
It's
and
gone,
if
it's
there's
gone.
a drop in the market, you don't get that money back either.
Okay. So they're doing that choice, whereas right now our funding choice has been what you were referring to as the required funding obligation. PERS says this is how much you owe, so we're making good on that. We're paying what we owe as we go, keeping our unrestricted available to us for future items, and at the same time keeping our emergency funds available to us should we need those.
Exactly.
Great, thank you.
I mean, if I could say, I kind of liken it to what we did with our water conservation. I mean, because they changed the rules, we were ahead of everybody, but because they changed the rules, we got hurt. And if we pay way ahead and they change the rules again, I mean, you're talking about a fluctuating target here. So I think it's best to take policy we have and just keep going, steady not
right,
mint,
and and just prepare for those
Right.
slight increases you're going to be expecting to see, because they will continue to increase as they've told us. But that's exactly right.
Thank you.
So that is all about our audit, up to our audit. Now I kind of want to bring you to what we're doing today. So let's look at 2014-15. So we're right in the middle of this new fiscal year. We already started planning and doing an interim. So we actually came out already the week of April 17th and started our on-site visit. evaluating the internal controls, again, looking for different changes in the finance department. We didn't identify any weaknesses or controls. There is still always discussions about improvement. That is not a weakness. We talk about recommendations, we review policies. For example, a lot of times, I think this year we were looking at the capital asset policy and said, you know what, there's a new pronouncement on asset impairments. Maybe you should add that into your capital assets, looking at maybe possible impairments within the city, assessing that to different departments, to having that as part of your policy. Those are the kind of recommendations that we talk about all throughout the year as we come out and look at these different things. And those aren't deficiencies in any way, shape, or form. They're just suggestions on always strengthening controls. Corona is very proactive on asking what else is coming up, what else can we do, have you noticed anything that we can improve on? So I like coming out here and having those discussions. We also, during our interim, we do conduct a citywide random fraud interviews, and this happens all across the city, all across the levels. So from management all the way down to, anybody, maintenance. It could be, we can go out in the field sometimes, look through public works. So we do interviews all throughout, and that's, unique, and it's a good impact for the city. When a lot of the frauds happened way back when the new standards came about saying that we should inquire about that, the whole main reason why the inquiry is there is they said, well, nobody asked me. That's why I would have said something, but nobody asked me. So that's an evolving audit technique that is always changing, and we do provide that throughout the city.
Debbie, you said that's unique. Do you mean that's unique to our city?
No, unique to that we go out and do. A lot of people just do fraud interviews within finance because that's a requirement.
And one of the things I think is important, especially after what happened in Pasadena, right?
Exactly. Yeah, fraud can happen anywhere, and it could be something small. Many times in different cities, we've gone out and someone said, you know what, the bunny event that happens every year at the recreation, I don't think it's very good control. So then we just, make sure that we advise finance about that, maybe going out or coming out ourselves during that time and just doing a review. There's a bunch of different levels. The big part is just them seeing the auditors coming out and knowing that we're out there. That usually has the biggest impact of us being out there.
Not a water audit. Water audit's good.
Okay, so based on some of these discussions that already have taken place, your management is actually very proactive. So we came up with a plan to actually do additional scope, because be aware that the financial audit just looks at your financial statements. It looks at a period of time, which is June 30th, and analyzes those numbers. And we actually give an opinion to saying, you look at these numbers as of June 30th. These are what the numbers are. We give you an opinion. You can make decisions on there. They want more. They want to go in depth because, like you brought up Pasadena, there's a lot of different things that can come up, and we provide those services to a lot of our cities. Like, these are additional things that you can be thinking about. What's keeping you up late at night? What do you think about? So we came up with a few items as far as additional scopes that we're going to do in this fiscal year. So we're going to look at wire transfers. So we're going to look at different wire transfers, and this is digging deeper than the normal audit. This is looking beyond that June 30th. We're going to look at wire transfers throughout the city, throughout the fiscal year. And we're going to look at those transfers that go between the different financial institutes. So we're going to look for authorizations, accountability, whether they're appropriate. Some of those transactions are appropriate. We're going to look at different bank reconciliations all throughout the year and dig deeper into those and look for accuracy, monitoring, and maybe some support documentations for any reconciling items. Cash receipts, we're going to dig deeper into your cash receipts as well and look at things like proper documentation. Where is it being recorded? Who's accountable for these amounts? And tracing them all the way to the financial institute. So just verifying that everything hits there. And then one that's similar to Pasadena is vendor contracts. Vendor contracts is very hot and popular right now. So we're going to review contracts for actual proper adherence to the procurement policy. We're going to review change orders in detail. and look for authorizations, and then identify what your monitoring procedures are there for work performed. Because a lot of that time that part gets missed on who's actually double checking when you get your invoice that work was actually performed. So that's what we're going to look at this fiscal year, and then we already started planning for the next fiscal year to look at more investment transactions. So looking at the activity that's happening within your investments and making sure they're in accordance with your policy and they're authorized appropriately. And then fuel inventory, that's really important too, looking at the fuel inventory, looking at your purchasing procedures, looking at monitoring the actual storage of it, and authorization and the monitoring of dispensing the fuel. So we're going to look at those types of items.
Just for clarification, this is not being done because something has been found in any of your audits. It's just us doing more due diligence and asking you to look into these areas.
Exactly. It was just a discussion that was going on that we were having on normally what's going on in the economy and different impacts of the city. What else can we do?
Very good.
And that concludes my slide. If you have any other questions.
Anybody have any other questions? Mr. City Manager.
I just wanted to thank the council for allowing us the time tonight. You know, I think all too many times there are things taken out of context on the internet, and I think this tonight should demonstrate for you and for the public that not only has Corona been doing a good job, they've been doing a really good job for a number of years. We have taken a definite approach to our cash position and our unfunded liability, and that's become such a negative word, unfunded liability. But you know, as we've used as an analogy so many times, an unfunded liability is nothing more than a mortgage. We have a mortgage, we've acknowledged the mortgage, we make our minimum payments, we continue to get credit increases, and we keep cash on hand for those times when there could be a catastrophic event that disrupts all of cities. And you can see those cities that have, you know, half as many months as we do. It's, you know, on the private side, we call it a burn rate. Their burn rate is much shorter, and they're going to hit catastrophe at a much faster rate than we will. So, you know, there's always room for improvement. That's why we're going to continue to work with Carrie's team. She's been, you know, a real champ with all this, and actually been the one that's partnering with me and asking for this deeper, wider review of all that we do in terms of creating that transparency and security for our residents to know of all the hard work that, you know, the employees here have done and that you guys have done with good, solid financial leadership and running the city like a business. We don't spend more than we make, as you can tell. We like to keep cash on hand, and as we're learning with Jonathan's efforts in the water, I wouldn't prescribe changing anything that we're doing, quite frankly. I'm very happy with these results. I've been mulling them over for the last couple of weeks, and you know, we learned from Jonathan that sometimes if you pay it forward, you get burned. When you look at cities not dissimilar to us who are getting to use 300 gallons a day and have to drop 28, pretty super simple. If we were at 320, 340, Jonathan could knock 28 off in a week. So I think the short of it is it's a great audit. I'm looking forward to the next one and hope that it's equally great. And I think the folks who get paid to look at our financials think it's great because we continue to get unsolicited upgrades. And to that, I appreciate the time tonight to have the auditor come and present that to you.
There was one other thing. When you talk about the audit letters, I sit on one of our regional commissions and boards in the county, and they had millions of dollars that were miscategorized and were found. And so it does happen where some of these things do end up with very negative results. There was no money missing, but it was miscategorized. It was just not good, and it was found. And you know, we had, as a board, had to talk to the staff to make sure that they came up with better controls because, quite frankly, you know, once you get into the millions of dollars, that's not a good thing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't missing, but Mr. Haley, did you have?
Yeah, a couple of things. One of my favorite words in our language is options, and you know, you get so many dollars in your pocket, and what are you going to do with it? And two of my colleagues mentioned that what we do is we pay off our obligations because we have to, just like a house payment. You've got to make that. And then with the other, then you've got more discretion. It's discretionary income, and then you can do other things with it. And I think that's a great way to go. I need to, it's interesting how what you talked about as far as the audit is concerned, and about another item that was on the agenda tonight, and that was the part about our expenses, the expenses of about employees and staff and public officials going on trips. And one of the items was we encourage the use of charge cards in lieu of cash. And you said exactly the same thing. You know, the less cash we use, the more seldom option for a mistake. And I just think that, you know, Mrs. Eden has done a superb job, again, rewriting this report for us. And you've kind of given her a pat on the back for doing that. I think it's late at night. We're doing a darn good job. I'm happy.
Ms. Spiegel.
Something else that was on the agenda, and Jonathan touched on it, was that we took some funds that we would have spent elsewhere and decided that we had a better use for them. And that is increasing the turf removal so that our citizens would have more of an incentive. And we do this on a constant basis, so it's not everything that's so finite that we can't change things, and that we look at the whole picture. And I think that's what I keep saying is, if you want to pull something out of context, go ahead and leave it like that. But I hope that people take the time and see the big picture. We wouldn't get increases in our rating from the bonding companies. We wouldn't have no delinquencies on our payments at OPED and with PERS and all the different obligations that we have. We don't have those. And so there's a consistent flow. And with auditors, we have different audits. We have Jonathan's department gets audited with the water department. So it's nothing that it's one little snippet. It's the big picture, and I think that we have to keep focusing on that and trying to educate people. You know, we keep hearing about transparency, and you know, whether it's videotaping and putting it public like it was read tonight, that's not what transparency is about. Transparency is about having the information here. The more we can share, great, but that's not what government transparency is about. We have been on councils and watched previous councils to where it was information intentionally withheld. This council's never intentionally withheld anything. Our books are open. We've told people, come look at it. Carrie's had people come from the public to look at any of our books. We have departments that offer, come look. Our police department, we've had people come and examine that, because that's what it's all about, is to come and look. But to take something and take a snippet is not fair to residents. And that's why we want you to be completely educated. And I'm ecstatic over this because having been, just so you know, 3 of us have been treasurer in the past. So there's actually, with the 4th treasurer there. So educated on the finances, and that, and I appreciate more of an in-depth explanation. We've all had the opportunity, but not in a public forum. And I think this is a good thing. And thank you, Daryl, for bringing this forward, because it's education of us, which is what a council meeting is. A council meeting is for us to be educated. With input from public, so that we can make policy decisions, and that's our job, is to make policy decisions. And so I'm just ecstatic, and I want to thank you for taking the time, and Daryl for bringing this forward, and Carrie for all your teamwork. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for sticking around for a late meeting.